Hello, everyone, and happy Sabbath to you all. I hope you're having a wonderful day. What if I told you that you can experience a taste of eternity every week of your life? Would you believe me? Well, the truth is, you can. Let me explain how you experience this. When you observe the Sabbath every week, you're partaking in a pattern that reflects eternity. The reason you can experience eternity every week is because you're called to be a holy priesthood. Now, this connection may not seem obvious, but follow my reasoning here. In order to understand how we get a taste of eternity through the Sabbath, we must first understand the concept of holiness and the role of the priesthood. Israel was called to be a holy priesthood. Moses said that the people of Israel in Exodus chapter 19, if you all turn to Exodus chapter 19 verse 6, God said through Moses, "Be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." The Apostle Peter uses similar language for the New Covenant church. But our priesthood is very different from Israel's. The Apostle Peter tells us in 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 9, if you all turn to 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 9, Peter says that you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. So, like Israel, we are also called to be a kingdom of priests. Let's look at the original purpose of the priesthood. Today we'll just be touching on the idea of priesthood, but there's much more to be said about this topic. I'll be giving a more in-depth message on this topic in an upcoming service. From the beginning, God created mankind and gave mankind responsibility to manage creation. This responsibility is a creative one. The Creator made man in His image and likeness. Therefore, mankind has creative abilities like God. And God wanted mankind to partake in the creative process. We see this when God gave Adam the task of naming the animals. Today I'll be using some ideas from Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi of the Commonwealth. He gives some very insightful ideas on the Torah. Jonathan Sacks points out that God created the natural world, but human beings create the social world. Sacks says that just as God makes the natural world by words, so we make the human world by words. So when Adam was naming the animals in the Garden of Eden, he was structuring the creation from the human perspective. By doing so, he was taking part in the creative process because he was bringing meaning to creation. He was creating the social order by which we understand the world. This wasn't just a creative task. It was a priestly responsibility. Because managing creation was a priestly function. God's creation, the Garden of Eden, was God's original dwelling place with humankind. It was the original temple, you could say. The temple was only a symbol pointing back to the time of Eden. Likewise, the responsibility of the Levitical priesthood to manage the sanctuary was only pointing back to Adam's responsibility to manage creation. Because the temple was a microcosm of the universe. The sons of Aaron and Levites had a specific function to keep the sanctuary holy, to separate the holy from the common. This is essentially what holiness means, to set apart. Fundamentally, this was the main duty of a priest, is to keep worship of the one true God pure and free from idol worship. So holiness is about setting apart the common from the pure, perfect, and loving nature of God. That which has been tainted by anything related to sin, not just sin itself, but even anything that is associated with the curse of sin, must be separate from God. These categories include anything that is associated with decay and the fragility of life that ultimately point to death. The priest was responsible for regularly purifying the temple with blood of animal sacrifices. That's why it was so dangerous to approach God in our physical form, because we, in our impurities, will be destroyed in the presence of God's glory if we aren't purified first. Not because God is cruel, but simply because God's nature is completely opposite to a world of decay and death. That's why there were very precise and specific laws and procedures for carrying out temple worship. The Levitical priesthood executed their responsibilities with immense precision and attention to detail. So we've now covered the responsibility of the priest to order holy space in the physical world. But it's not just space that is holy. There is also holy time. God from the very beginning separated time, making some time common and some time holy, that is, set apart. In the beginning, God created the seasons. If you all turn to Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be signs and seasons for days and years." The Hebrew word used here for days the Hebrew word used here for seasons is moed, which is the same word that is used to describe God's annual holy days. God has woven the concept of worship into the creation through the Sabbath. After God finished creating the universe and mankind, he rested on the seventh day. If you all turn to Genesis chapter 2, verse 3, Genesis chapter 2, 3, God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God created and made. The word sanctified here means made holy. So God set the seventh day apart. Now, just like any relationship, we need to set aside time for the people we care about. We need to dedicate time for the people we love. Just think if you had a friend who only set aside time when they could fit you into their schedule, or when it suited them, or always on their terms. The same, I don't think we would like that friend very much. We're always supposed to love our friends, but if it's only on the other person's terms, there's not a mutual relationship there. We need to set aside time for the people we care about in our lives, and it can't just always be on our terms. This is what holy time means. It's time set apart for God. We can and should come to God any time throughout the week and worship Him and have a relationship and fellowship with God. But God also expects us to set aside time for Him on His terms, not just on our terms. So how does all this relate to my original question? Can you experience eternity every week today? The idea of eternity is deeply connected with the priestly service and the Sabbath. In the narrative of the Torah, there are two main leadership roles. I'm going to borrow some ideas again from Jonathan Sacks. He gives some interesting insights on the role of a prophet and a priest in the Torah. There's a difference between these different types of leadership roles. The prophet's role was to speak the word of God in history. The role of the prophet was like a change agent on behalf of God. According to Sacks, the prophet responds to the unique circumstances of the here and now. They operate within history to change the future. Their job was to encourage the poor and oppressed, to give hope, but also to steer the people away from destruction by encouraging them to keep God's laws. They acted in history as the spokesman of God. Just like Moses, the commanding leader who led Israel out of slavery and into freedom, or like Isaiah, who warned Israel that their sins would eventually lead to an invasion by Assyria and later Babylon. Isaiah also gave hope that their future generations would one day return again. Sacks says that there's only one thing predictable about the future, and that is unpredictability. This statement is particularly true about the prophet who lived in a time of change. The role of the priest is quite different according to Sacks. The life of a priest followed a pattern of continuity. The role of the priest, as we've discussed earlier, is to keep order over the holy and keep it separate from the common. The priest in the Torah engaged in rituals that repeat over time. Sacks said that a priest engages in rites that in essence never change. The priest made sure that fire was always burning for the menorah. They managed the daily, monthly, and annual sacrifices. Unlike the prophet, who was commissioned to change the status quo, the function of the priest was to be a steward of holiness that organizes time across according to an unchanging pattern. According to the Bible, as we've just read, even time is holy. And this is part of the priestly duty, to keep time holy. Just as worship is woven into creation, so also eternity is woven into time. We often, in our modern post-Enlightenment worldview, see time as a linear process. We view time in terms of past, present, and future. But time also has a cyclical nature to it. When every week ends, a new one begins. When every month ends, a new one begins. And when every year ends, a new one begins. Through these cycles, we see the pattern of eternity reflected in the Sabbath and the annual holy days. We see the same pattern not just in time, but even in the creation. Every season goes through a death and rebirth. When fall ends and winter comes, much of life dies. But when spring comes, nature is resurrected again. The entire creation points to a rebirth, a new beginning. The universe is centered around cycles, and our lives follow these cycles. So in conclusion, that's why the holy days, the moed, follow the seasons. God has woven the pattern of eternity into the fabric of time and space. Therefore, the priestly service represents that which does not change. It represents eternity within time and space. The priestly role is responsible for always organizing time according to God's eternal pattern. That's why God says not just to observe his Sabbaths and holy days, but to keep them holy. If you all turn to Deuteronomy 6:12, in Deuteronomy 6:12, God said, "Observe the Sabbath day, keep it holy as the Lord your God commanded you." Because it's a priestly service to organize time and separate the holy from the common. Likewise, for us, one of our responsibilities as priests in the order of Melchizedek is to organize time so that we can separate the holy from the common. So, when you observe the Sabbath at the end of every week, when you observe the Passover at the beginning of every year, or when you observe the feast every fall, you're getting a taste of eternity in this age. You get the opportunity to participate in a continual priestly service, and you get a taste of eternity within time. Every week of your life is a new beginning, and every Sabbath is a taste of eternity. It was great seeing so many of you online. I hope to see you all next time, and I hope you all have a very happy Sabbath. Shalom, everyone.